Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Three Man Booth alongside Ted Emrich and Mike Couzens. I'm Jared Sandler, and as you can tell, the three-man booth is a little crowded. I think it was a couple months ago, Paul Biancardi, responding to one of our tweets promoting the episode, accused us of being prejudiced against analysts. And so we decided, hey, you know what, that's actually not a bad idea. We went down a list and everyone said no. Kirk said yes, he was our first ask. But then the next 99 people Ted and Mike suggested said no. So we ended up asking Paul to join us as well. But Paul and Kirk, we really appreciate it. Thanks so much for hanging out with us today.
Thank you very much. At least 99 guys said no. So I'm number 100. So I made the top 100. I'm happy.
All about the top 100.
All about the top 100, Jared. You'll understand that.
Yeah, one day. I never could crack that. Kirk, thanks for waking up early for us.
Early. This is late, man. This is like dinner time for me. Mike knows. I mean, I'm an early riser, but no, I appreciate you guys having me on, man. I'm excited to be with you.
In normal times, I can text Kirk at like 7:30 a.m. Eastern time, and he's on the elliptical at the gym already.
Yeah, it depends. But I'm responding though. I may not be on the elliptical, but I will be responding.
So Paul is the foremost authority on high school basketball and recruiting for the world. He does his stuff for ESPN, and Kirk covers college football and the NFL for ESPN. Both have worked with at least one of the two people here. Paul's worked with both Mike and Ted. Kirk has worked with Mike. I don't think, Ted, have you and Kirk worked together before?
No, not yet.
No.
Okay.
No,
All right.
not yet.
And I've worked with Kirk as the spotter. So I have worked with at least one of the people here. Paul, since you've worked with both Mike and Ted, I want to start off by asking you a question from a recruiting standpoint. Which of those two would be the better recruiter? If a college was looking for a lead recruiter or an assistant coach to head that up, who would be better? I know my answer, but I'm very curious your answer.
Well, I'll tell you this about both guys, okay? They have great personalities, but if you're going to put someone to sit in a room and talk to a recruit, you got to have Ted Emrich in there.
That's my
You
answer.
got to have Ted in there. At the end of the day, Mike will want to play that recruit one-on-one. He still talks about his game, whether it's on or off air, which lends no credibility to the conversation. So Ted is the guy who can do the recruiting for us.
So Mike, by the way, Paul, I've played with Mike. He doesn't enter the paint. He's the tallest person in the world who refuses to enter the paint. He's so soft. And I also think Mike would just be really honest. He'd go to a recruit and be like, listen, I don't care if you want to come to our school. They're telling me to talk to you. I don't think you're that good. Whereas I think Ted he'd play the game a little bit.
Well, yeah, Ted's very genuine. I don't know if he played the game, but he understands the recruiting vernacular, as Mike does as well. But again, Mike comes from a player perspective, and I think Ted would come more as a recruiting perspective.
Yeah, you can put the salesman hat on occasionally, I'm sure.
Yeah, Ted can really push the product where Mike may push the people away.
It's true. However, I will tell you, Paul, as you know, I played with an NBA product, Sean Kilpatrick, who I helped by scoring 13 career points at White Plains High School.
You did it. And you did a heck of a job rebounding for him in practice.
Excellent work.
I'm the only one, though, that can say that DeAndre Jordan's nuts were in their faces when he dunked on me. That was a fun experience. He got ejected like 5 minutes later. We almost won.
Jared, you can always say you landed on a poster.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so Kirk, the point of having Kirk and Paul on, we spend so much time talking about play-by-play and the various elements. And one of the things we've discussed is the relationship with an analyst and working with an analyst. And, we all agreed, we thought it was important to hear it from the other side. What does an analyst want in a play-by-play guy? And what are some of the things that is important or are important for a play-by-play person to know from an analyst point of view? So Kirk, I'll start with you on that note. And Paul, I'll ask you the same question, but what are the things, as you guys have worked with various play-by-play partners, what are the things that help you the most, or you would want a play-by-play person to know, like, hey, these are the things that would help us work together?
I think for me, and I'll just speak for myself. The first thing I would think, obviously, in building chemistry, I think is just the conversation that we both have is that we're here to do a show, and so I think that there's some times where let's be honest, there's egos that walk into a door, right? And a lot of people love to hear themselves talk. I'm not necessarily one of those, but I think when you walk in and you meet, especially a play-by-play guy for the first time, the first thing is that you want to fill that person out, but just because you want to understand how are we going to do this? And so I think with me starting off and working with Mike, I think you walk in and me and Mike had a 10-minute conversation, and like, okay, we're going to be great together, because there's a sense of it's not about you and it's not about me, it's about us and how do we put the best product, for people to consume. And I think that's what starts it off for me. And then, there's little things where, there's certain times I would love to be teed up. Hey, tee me up here, or give me, or I got something, you know what I mean? Like talking throughout a commercial break or things like that. But that just kind of comes with time as well. And then when you start to know a person's pace, right? You know how they talk, you know how they are going to end their sentence. And that's when you can jump in. Like that takes more time than anything. Like, I don't know how I can tell somebody like, hey, talk. You know what I mean? Like that's the hard part. But I think just for me, it always comes down to just, two people working together and understanding that, look, let's just make great television. Let's make great radio, whatever it may be. And because I've worked with some guys who they love to talk, right? Not you, Mike, you're good. But I'm talking about other guys, like, you know what I mean? It's like, how do I walk in? Like my first ever game not first ever, but I did an NFL game with Dick Stockton, right? And so sometimes you're like, wow, like I don't know where to get in or where not to get in. And so I wasn't experienced yet. I was still very green. And so I felt that he led the broadcast where I felt like I could have exerted myself a little bit more. But that, just like I said, all that stuff comes over time and you got to be comfortable. And that, it just takes experience. It really does. I can't really just say like, hey, I'll come in. Hey, this is what I want you to do. It takes maybe sometimes a game or two. Some people are just pros. They can do it in like a quarter or a half, but it does take time.
I think that definitely made a huge difference. I remember the summer of 2018 before we worked our first season together, and we probably talked on the phone for like 45 minutes. And right away, I knew we were going to get along well, even off the air, which is, I think, almost equally as important as it is on the air. And
Right.
A big part of it, which is interesting because you and I are like 7 or 8 years apart. Paul, we are not as close in age, but we also still get along really well off the air. So it can work in both directions, but I find that it's great when the play-by-play and the analyst are close in age. There's a lot of other factors that go into it, but we have a similar cultural lexicon to refer to. We share memes with each other on Instagram. Like there's just different things that we'll do throughout the week to keep ourselves entertained. So I knew that was important. And Paul, to go to you, like doing high school basketball with ESPN, you've worked with Joe Davis, you've worked with Justin Kutcher, you've worked with me, you've worked with Ted. What has been a key thread for you in having successful high school broadcasts when your broadcast partners have varied so much over the course of the last 10 years or so?
Yeah, and Adam Amin as well. I think everything Kirk said is absolutely true and vital. It's us, meaning me and you, Mike, or me and you, Ted, making them look good. It's not even us together so much, but it's us as a team trying to make the product, the game, the players look better than they are. And I think all the play-by-play people that I've worked with just have a gift of making the analyst look good and understanding the analyst when he wants to talk, when he wants to get teed up, and how he thinks. And that off-court chemistry, I try to build that as quick as I can with you, Mike, and Ted, and I did that with Justin and Adam and Joe Davis, because when you get off-camera chemistry, then I believe you do have that on-camera chemistry. You almost can finish each other's sentences. You know how to tease each other on air. You know how to make fun of each other without worrying if you're offending someone. You know how to challenge somebody. And all those things make great TV. It wouldn't be any fun if we just agreed with each other the whole broadcast. So getting to know the play-by-play person, which I've done off camera as much as possible, not just the meetings, maybe it's breakfast, maybe it's dinner, like you said, on the phone. I think getting to know people beyond who they are as a play-by-play person, like I have with you and Ted, I think that helps enormously when you're doing a broadcast. And I couldn't, the chemistry creates great communication, which I think creates awesome television.
Yeah, Paul, I have found that time vital with you, whoever I happen to work with, that dinner before the game, right? The night before, or lunch the day of, if we have a game that night, just something. And it doesn't even have to be, oh, let's talk about the game and the show and what we're going to get into. No, we're talking about anything and everything. And we're all at ease with each other. I can't imagine parachuting in and yeah, I'll see you at the game. I'll see you at the stadium, at the arena. And all of a sudden, I mean, we're going through everything, right? We're rehearsing the open and we're looking at graphics. Like I don't have a feel for you. And I have always found that time to be crucial, just like you said, to build chemistry, because that comes through on the air. Another question for both of you guys, and Kirk, you can start here. I'm curious, can you describe a time, an experience, a game when you just had fun with your partner? And it didn't have to be, some overtime thriller, some classic game. It might have been a blowout, but describe to me a time where you guys were just in the pocket, so to speak. You were in lockstep with each other. You're bouncing back and forth. The conversation is flowing. And both of you have that chemistry rolling.
Ted, I think the best time for those moments are in blowouts, right? Like, because the thing is, when you've got a great game, the games kind of speak for itself, right? I mean, the action on the field, it speaks for, and really no one's really listening to you talk, because the action is telling you, hey, what's going on? It's, in the fourth quarter, one team's down 3 points and they're driving to either tie the game or win the game. So it's like the talking is not necessarily there. When you start to have fun is in blowouts, because obviously you got to entertain yourself. I think me and Mike, one of the more entertaining games that we had, I'm not entertaining, but we'll go, what was that? Boise State versus UConn. It was the worst game ever.
At the time, the largest disparity of total yards gained between two FBS teams. It was like 700 something to 200 something.
It was a bad game, but I think going into it, we knew that, hey, this could be a blowout. We got to have some material, right? And so now it's almost like we're getting ready to do not a football game, but do a show. So it's like, okay, bring your A material, because we may have to have some banter outside of this football game, because we can't talk about, in the fourth quarter, like, oh, that was a great first down. There's, they're only down by 37 now, right? Like, come on, man, let's be real. But I think you start to have fun when you start to have different things. And I'll credit Mike with this, and I know I'm trying to work on that now, is that it's hard, I think, in the pandemic, right, to try to have that sort of chemistry and do things. And I know what me and Mike would always do was get on the road and let's just go see what the city has to offer, right? Let's go do something, whether it was eating at one of the best local eateries, whether it's going fly fishing, whether it's going, do an activity or something. And now,
Speedos.
yes. Water polo. Honestly, it was sort of like, all right, let's just go try it out. But it became a theme of our broadcast, and it was always something for us to lean on, right? And it was something that in a blowout or anything like that, we can talk about it and expand on it a little more. And now you start to get into a groove, because now you're starting to talk about other things, like, hey, what about this other team over here? You're like, oh man, I know. And that's where the flow comes from. The flow comes from, I think, what Paul was talking about as well, is that you have that time together before the game, and then you're just bouncing ideas off. And then, like, look, okay, if this goes into a blowout, your real chemistry comes out, right? If in the blowout, your real chemistry comes out. And I've seen it in other broadcasts where like, hey, these two dudes are just right now just talking like they're at a bar, right? There's the football game. And then once that football game leaves, there is this sense of, man, these two dudes actually are tight. These dudes are pretty, like they're like brothers almost, you know what I mean? And that comes through just from the part of just being together and the experience you have together.
Yeah, I couldn't agree anymore. I think you become friendly with your play-by-play guy, and hopefully you become friends. And that's when I think the broadcast really enhances in terms of the blowout, because anybody could call a great, exciting game and it sounds good. You always sound good during a great game. But when the blowouts happen, you have to have big picture conversation topics, and you do those off camera. And you've probably done them at breakfast, maybe a glass of red wine at night. I don't know what my play-by-play guys do at times, but you know, you can have fun off camera, so you can have fun on camera.
I'm curious, you guys both, so Kirk, you played in the NFL. Paul, you were a college basketball head coach, a coach of the year. I mean, like the knowledge for your respective sports is obviously at a supreme level. And no matter, you know, Kirk, when you worked with Mike, no matter how much he tries to learn about football, there's going to be a gap. There are experiences you had as a player that will allow you to understand the game better. Same, Paul, with you and all of your partners, you know, be it Ted, Mike, Adam, Joe, any of those guys. I'm curious what, as far as that gap in understanding the game, what is important? What do you guys like out of your play-by-play partner from like that side of it? Because I think to some degree it's not the play-by-play guy's job to analyze, but if you don't really know the game, it's going to make life a lot tougher. And I'm just curious, what are those things that you think are most important, how they can support you in that regard? Obviously, it's your role to analyze, and it's more important you have a better understanding of the game, but how can they support you in that, I guess, particular facet?
Well, for me, I like when I get challenged at times. Like, what would you do in this situation? You were a former head coach. I love being challenged because that stimulates me to think about what I would do. I also like when guys, you know, they tee you up on a situation. You've been in that situation before as a coach. You know, how would you handle this? So I think the questions that they ask, you know, really help you as an analyst. It's not just, you know, what do you see here? Because you can get cookie cutter questions, you know, all game long, and you really don't get your point across. I think Mike and Ted, for example, know me so well, they find the right question to ask me to get me to talk about the right answer, you know, what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling sometimes, because you don't have a lot of time, you know, in a basketball game because the pace goes up and down, usually at free throws or dead ball situations. So I think the questions, how they challenge you sometimes, maybe how they tease you at other times, I think can really enhance my answers as an analyst. And that, again, that goes back to how much and how well you know each other to ask those questions. I've been with Adam and Justin and Joe Davis and Mike. You asked me, they were all great play-by-play guys. I mean, I haven't been with everybody that's been great on college games. Some guys are just cookie cutter guys. They ask certain questions about the game. And when the game's over, you may not talk to them or see them ever again. And I think that shows up during the broadcast, during the crucial times of like when you want an analyst to give his deep opinion on what's going on.
Yeah, Paul, I think you hit it on the head. I love being challenged, right? And I love when a play-by-play person says, you know, pretty much comes at you and says like, all right, Kirk, put your defensive coordinator hat on here. Hey, put your offensive coordinator hat on here. Because now not only are they engaging with me, now it's like, okay, I have to give a pretty good analytical answer to what I think should happen on the next play. And so I get excited when I get those moments, or especially when you get teed up and just say, hey, big third down here, you know, Kirk, what are you expecting? You know, and I'll tell what I'm expecting. And I think one thing that I want to take and kind of go forward a little bit is more of, I feel like there's certain situations in a game that are like always huge and you never know, right? And so now that is more about, I think a play-by-play person just really, it's a simple thing, but hey, why did that play work? You know what I mean? Like, why did he shoot that pass? And sometimes it could be where the play-by-play person knows the answer to it. And that's the thing about it. Even if they do know the answer, it's still okay to ask me the question. It could be as elementary as possible, but we're talking to an audience that just may not know. You know what I mean? Like, 3rd and 4. Why are they doing a hard count here, Kirk? You know what I mean? Like, they're doing a hard count because they want to see how undisciplined a defense can be. And if they jump off sides, that's a free 5 yards. That's a free first down. And they didn't have to work to do that. Anybody would love free stuff, right? Yeah, I'll take a free first down. But it's just little things like that obviously the play-by-play knows, hey, it's elementary in their mind. But I think when you ask the question, no matter what, we can explain it and still give it out to the audience to where, oh, okay, that makes sense. You know what I mean? So I love those situations of just, hey, why did this happen? Or you just give me a house, because it gives me more, it brings more out of me. You know what I mean? So I know I really love that part of it.
Admittedly, I do that all the time.
What's that?
So what?
I said, admittedly, I do that all the time. I will ask a question that might be a simple answer to a coach or a player, but like you said, if it helps teach the audience something, because we can get stuck in our bubble where we think that, hey, a 46 defense or a 1-3-1 sounds simple because we think about it all the time, but the audience may not think about it.
Yeah, one quick point on that, Mike, you always ask questions just like that. You knew the answer, but you asked anyway because you wanted to hear what I had to say because you thought the audience should hear it. And Ted does the same thing with the player rankings. Why is he number one? What makes him so good? And if I don't give the right answer, Ted will ask a better question to maybe get that answer. So, and I think that that's so important because my job is to say what's going on. Your job is to say, I'm sorry, what's going on. My job is to say the why, and then break down the why and then explain how it's happening. And again, the questions that get asked, they could be simple, but they really get the analyst to start to think a little bit and probe.
I love the balance of the two sports and the way that our shows work. For Paul, with high school basketball, it's a recruiting show where there happens to be a game going on. And with college football, Kirk, there's a game. And if it is not good, then we get into a show of bigger picture stuff. So they balance each other out on both ends. I have another question about being an analyst and what it takes to become an analyst at the level that each of you are. Paul, your path started at Salem State, and then you got into college coaching, Horizon League Coach of the Year at Wright State, and assistant at Ohio State as well. Kirk, you were in the group of 5 at San Diego State, but a 2-time Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year. You played in Buffalo and Jacksonville, and people know you best from being a linebacker for the Raiders. So you each took different paths to get to where you were. But how did you get into being an analyst, and how did you get to the level where you are now? I'll start with you, Paul.
Well, for me, I was coaching at St. Louis University with the late Rick Majerus, and a ground floor opportunity opened with ESPN, which was the recruiting director position, which entailed ranking the players of the country, the best players, evaluating them. And then ESPN at that time was already broadcasting football games. They wanted to broadcast high school basketball games. So I had a chance to be an analyst for high school games. And at the same time, because of my coaching background as an assistant and a head coach, I had the opportunity to be an analyst for the college game. And from that point on, it just kind of grew each and every year. So I never thought I'd be in the media. I'd never thought I'd be on TV. But the opportunity came because of a ground floor situation that ESPN was about to build. I just happened to know the person who was doing the hiring pretty well. And I knew his friend real well, and the opportunity presented itself. So I took a little bit of a risk by leaving coaching at that time, but it paid off big time. And my coaching background absolutely has lent itself to evaluating players, ranking players, talking about player tendencies, scouting players, and explaining to the country who's good and why, how can they separate themselves from each other. And then obviously everything an analyst does in a game. And I think when I do a college game, it's a different headset. We're talking more about the game. You scrutinize the coach a little bit more. You talk about the flow of the game itself and what it means for these two teams and what does the future look like for these teams. You talk about the player performances. But on the recruiting side, it really is like a recruiting show. You're promoting your rankings, you're promoting their abilities, you promote what schools are looking at them, and then you talk about the game after.
Yeah, I think for me, my path was, obviously being a former player, and you mentioned Mike being a two-time defensive player of the year in the conference. Well, like what comes with that is a lot of media attention, and so a lot of media requests. And I had always wanted to work within like kind of behind the scenes when it came to sports. I was the guy that stayed up late for that last like 10 minutes of the local news of sports. Right, remember we didn't necessarily have the sports center just yet, or I didn't really understand it yet. Yeah, and as you got older, I always said, man, that would be so cool to talk sports and be an analyst. And so I would watch and listen to the Pat Summerall, John Madden crew. Right, you would listen to those legendary broadcasting crews and just listen. I mean, I sometimes you almost listen to them and turn the game and not even watch the game, just listen. Right, I was lucky enough over the last couple of years before he retired to listen to Vin Scully, and I truly embraced Vin because I'm not from Los Angeles, but I just know the legendary voice. And it was funny because me and my wife, she said, "Why do you always have the TV so loud, but you're not in the room?" I said, "I just want to listen to Vin Scully," because even though I was not in the room, I felt like I was in the room and I was sitting next to Vin. So it was like things like that that just kind of really got me going. But just to go back, I became more media savvy in college, and I just, even though I was in school for criminal justice, I really started taking to communications and the behind the scenes of just production. And I was like, you know what, I really want to do this. And so my senior year of at San Diego State, we had just finished the season, and I had been telling them like, I want to do something. I got to figure something out. It was like, well, you're no longer collegiate. I may want you to do something. And basically I called my first high school football game as a analyst. Um, and it was great. I called 3 games that year, and right then and there, I knew what I wanted to do. Even though I still had a football career ahead of me, I knew what I wanted to do. And so how would I be able to get back to this when the time was right? So you had to make sure you keep kind of laying those seeds down and letting it grow while I'm still having to focus on, my NFL career. And I always did radio requests, and I've always done, analyst requests for just football stuff outside of it. And then when I finally retired, walked away from the game, opportunity presented itself, fellas. I had an opportunity to start off at San Diego State as the color analyst for their radio broadcast. And, I never thought that opportunity, I mean, I didn't know how big that opportunity was at the time. I had just retired, but I knew it was a place where I can really start to just work on my craft really and get into it. And I thank the great Ted Leitner, who's still going. He was my first, play-by-play guy, and, my post-career. And then from there, I felt that, and you guys can help me here, you learn how to do TV by doing radio first, right? Or is it easier to do TV than radio? I've always thought that I'm glad I worked in radio first to get me prepared for television, because television, you feel like you don't want to make a mistake. But on radio, you can kind of take your time, you're relaxed, nobody cares what you're wearing. Like it's just everything, it's just totally different. And that kind of helped me grow within the business. And obviously opportunities, they came about obviously because you do the work, you prepare, you have people in your corner who's always looking for different opportunities for you. And I've just been excited. It's my fourth year with ESPN already. I can't believe it's like kind of going by so fast. But I was thrown into the NFL circle. I did NFL for 2 years, well, 2.5 years. And I wasn't ready, fellas. Like I was not ready. Like going on there and with Dick Stockton and Sam Rosen, like legendary guys who've called games, and I'm sitting here and I'm like, I don't even know if I belong on the same booth as them. But the confidence that I've gained over the last couple of years in knowing who you are and what you master has really helped me get to where I think I am right now. And I'm still learning. I'm still watching guys, but it is the passion that you have that where you started at, kind of get you to where you are now to say, man, I've come a long way and I know I'm still not where I want to be.
Love that. We all have that journey. And to your point, Kirk, I just from the play-by-play perspective, I feel fortunate that radio is a foundation,
Yeah.
right? You learn how to call a game that way, and TV is drastically different. It has to be. It's a bigger canvas to paint on. It's so different, but radio can be a base for you, and I still do it, and I really enjoy it. They're just all obviously very different. Uh, we talked about how the some of the positive traits, what you want to see and hear from a play-by-play announcer that you're working with, but sometimes I do feel like it can help aspiring broadcasters hear the other side of it, the negative side of it, and so. Uh, Without naming names, certainly, and hopefully those names are not on this call, but can you describe your worst experience with a play by play announcer and what made it so bad? What made it such a struggle for you as an analyst for that game?
Oh man, that's easy. It was Dick Stockton. I mean, I'll just throw it out there. I mean, not because of the way that he called a game, not the way that he prepared for a game, but I didn't agree in the way he started a game. I need to rehearse. That is part of what I do. The people don't understand. The worst part of a broadcast for me is the open. I just want to get through the open. We get through the open. Hey, phew, let's go to work.
Yes.
But it's literally that 2-minute open can almost, dictate how you are in that game. If you have a horrible open, you're like, oh my, you're thinking about the open literally the whole entire game. And so with Dick Stockton, for him, he didn't want to rehearse open. He was like, no, not save it. We do like, hey, this is what we're gonna do, and these are the pictures. We're gonna go from here, they're gonna go from there. We're gonna talk a little bit about the coach, and then okay. And I'm like, all right, let's run through it. 2 minutes, right? No, just save it for the broadcast. No, I don't want to hear it. I want it to be organic. I'm like, I'd rather talk it now, see the timing, the pace of it, and then move on from that. But he, that's the way that he did things, and that necessarily didn't work for me. You know what I mean? So here I am going into an open. You almost felt like you're blind going into an open, and I'm not sure what I want to say. How long do I have to say it? But you kind of lead to deference on that one and let the guy who's got the most experience been calling World Series and NBA finals. Like, who am I, this young pup over here, to be like, excuse me, can we please do a rehearsal of an open? Like, yeah, whatever. That's not going to happen. But I think that's just my only worst experience. I think there's always times in games you wish you had a little more time, or, it was a big call. You're like, oh, I really wanted to get one little thing in there. But, that stuff, it happens. But I think just for me, that's probably the only worst experience, which is that he didn't want to do rehearse the open. Like, the rest of the game is great, but I love to rehearse the open just so we know. And, outside of that, man, I can't really think of too many crazy things that really happened, but that one was, for a young guy, you want to be prepared. And that's what I think gives us all of our confidence, is that we go into a game prepared. Right? People like, oh man, you ever nervous? I was like, no, because I prepare. Like, I'm there, like, okay, boom, I know what's going on. But if you give me something and I'm not prepared for, obviously, it's going to be a little bit different, because I think we all, I don't know about you, I don't work with Mike. He's a perfectionist. I'm a perfect. We take this thing serious, and if we don't do something perfect, it can bite at you for a little bit.
Well, for me, about 6-7 years in, I was with somebody calling a game, and they had that radio personality where they talked all the time. And I don't think they really even listened to what I said. It was basically they were listening to talk next versus listening to respond to what I had to say. And that gentleman just talked the whole game through. And it was hard for me to get a word in at times. And, I didn't want to interrupt him because he was talking on a television broadcast. And I just felt the need to maybe say something about a particular play or something that maybe we talked about in the meeting. And I really couldn't get a word in. And it was difficult at times because you can't get a word in, and then you're trying to finish your sentence because they want to call the next actual play, whatever it is. So I felt very uncomfortable sitting there, not knowing when to talk, when not to. It felt like it was scripted the whole time, the whole game, meaning that, whatever happened on the last play, we were just going to talk about that on the next play. And there was no big picture to it. It was like, call the game, talk about the game, and then let's leave the game. No interaction when we got into town. Basically, we were at the shoot around, and that was about it. So there was no chemistry. There was no communication. And for me, it was difficult because, I want to be very respectful to the play-by-play person. But at the same time, I know my role as an analyst is to talk and to give my opinion and to explain the why during the game. So it was a tough experience, but and the game wasn't very good. So that made it worse because, as you talked about earlier, when there's a blowout, so to speak, that's when the chemistry and the conversation has to be maybe at its best. And it was really not good because, one team was down double figures with a couple of minutes to go, deep double figures. And, he's dribbling over to the right, he's looking to the left. It's like, we don't need to talk about the game anymore. This game's over and nobody cares where he's dribbling the basketball. So I just kind of sat there and got through it and never worked with him again, which professionally was a good thing.
I think, and
Mike, I didn't mean to mention your name, but
that is definitely not Mike. Thank goodness.
we're gonna wrap this up. I think with those last two things, just from a play-by-play standpoint, like important takeaways, with what Paul said, listening, and I've been guilty of this as well. You're so worried about looking down and getting that next note, or, if a guy's at the free throw line, it's a great time to share some information, but maybe the analyst is saying something that, is going to lend to a great conversation. And, listening, as we've talked about in the past, is so huge. And with what Kirk mentioned, like, you're a team, right? And, you might have your way of doing things and the analyst might have his way, but you got to kind of meet in the middle sometimes. You got to come together. Like if the analyst wants to rehearse and you don't, well, you should rehearse, because you're not putting that guy in a good position to succeed if that's going to make him more comfortable. And then maybe like the next broadcast you talk about it, like, hey, Kirk, like, I don't want to rehearse because this is, X, Y, and Z or whatever. Yeah. Maybe you figure it out, but I do think those are two things to consider from a play-by-play standpoint in regards to that connection and that relationship with the analyst.
And one thing I do want to say, Jared, is that I was basically saying also too, I want to make sure I clarify too, that it was just because he wanted everything to be organic. He was a guy that he wanted to have natural facial reaction to what I had to say, right? If I was like, Mike Zimmer, this team is playing really, really bad right now. And obviously the big reason is because his quarterback is not thinking like, whoa, you know what I'm saying? Like, you get the natural reaction that we do, like if we're doing a face to face. So I got his point and I understood why. I know for me, it was just a little bit different. That's not necessarily how I roll, but.
Last thing I want to make too, with ESPN, just working for them, the only media company for the last 12 years, going to games, everybody on the crew, right, has a job. Everybody has a responsibility. And coming from a coaching background, whether I'm an assistant coach who serves the head coach and the team, or I'm the head coach and I need people to help me make my decisions, you have to have an understanding and a caring about the other person's job, whether it's the graphics person, the director's person, the producer who's in charge of all of us, and the play-by-play. As an analyst, I want to know, how can I help my play-by-play guy? How can I help the graphics person? How can I help the cameraman? How can I help the director? What can I do for the producer? Because the more that I could serve other people and help other people be good at their job, the more they're going to help us on the broadcast be good. And that makes for great TV. I think everybody gets really, as we lead up to a game, everybody's in their own little tunnel vision of what they do. And I respect that. But when you can think outside the box of what other people do, I think you have a better show and a better game.
Fellas, Paul, Kirk, thanks so much for taking the time. We really, really appreciate you guys hanging out with us and sharing some of your experiences and your knowledge. And hopefully, we have such a play-by-play focus. Hopefully there are analysts who or aspiring analysts who watch this and are able to take some stuff away. But we really do appreciate it.
No, thank you guys.
Thank you.
To have entertained dozens of people, including my mom.
I did text you that, Mike. I did text you that a couple weeks ago. What did I say?
You said somebody's mom was always watching.
Somebody's mom is always watching. Always remember that. Don't care what game you're doing. Somebody's mom is always watching.
I'm sure Paul has to deal with that on the recruiting side. All
text messages at halftime will tell you that is accurate.
Yeah.
Hey, my son, they'll text me and they'll say, "My son, you said my son was 6'2". He's 6'2 and a half."
I love sitting next to Paul doing games at high school game, and you should see the high major head coaches who are texting Paul at halftime of the game.
And during the game and before the game.
Who else is in on this kid? Tell me now. Who else is in?
Can you mention us?
There it is. Okay.
Well, fellas, we
Always playing
appreciate
the
it.
game.
That's gonna do it for this edition of the 3-Man Booth. We'll talk to you later.